Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Rob Smallwood, the Senior Director for Digital Modernization at GDIT. Rob, good to have you on.
Thanks, Tom. Happy to be here.
And this subject of modernization of federal IT is a really big one, and every agency talks about it. But I guess a good place to start is, given the number, hundreds of systems that the given agency is running, what's your best advice for agencies to prioritize what it is they should go after to modernize? Because you can come at it from many different vectors. From your experience looking across government, what's your best advice?
Well, we usually attack it from what's going to provide the most value versus the cost, right? And that comes to, is it going to improve efficiencies? Is it going to drive effectiveness and, provide for better informed decisions for our customers? And to enable that, you really have to have a really good understanding of what the mission is and what the users require to be successful. And then from there, you figure out how IT can actually enable that success. And it really, it requires you to do a little bit of time because every agency is not the same, right? There's not one size fits all to the agencies, and there's not one size fits all to their user base. So you have to have to really understand what they need to do to be successful. And then from there, look at what you currently have in the environment. If you have a lot of outdated equipment, it's aged and coming to end of life, that's obviously a security vulnerability as well as a reliability vulnerability. So maybe you want to look at modernizing those systems first. You want to look at what, as I said, what's going to provide the most value to the agency in aggregate. And I think the other important point when you start looking at the different users and what they require for success, sometimes it's not even about modernizing what you currently provide from a services and capability perspective. What I find is when you get that intimacy, you actually identify areas within the business that maybe they have this very manual process they're doing over in HR, and you're like, we could put this in a ServiceNow workflow or automate it some way. I'm like, really? And we're like, yeah. So I find that is one of the less anticipated results from getting that intimacy.
And a lot of agencies are looking at the customer experience, customer service improvement kind of perspective. And is that a good way to possibly come at it? Because that backs you up into the systems that support your service goals, and to the public, that is, or maybe to other agencies or even to your own employees. But the idea of better service, that must back up into what systems have to be fixed or modernized to deliver what you hope for in terms of service.
Absolutely. As part of working with the user communities, it's not just about what they need to succeed. It's also a perception, right? You have to identify what is a perception of the services that you're providing to them. Because maybe you think, I have all these metrics and it says I'm up 99% of the time. But if the users aren't happy for some reason, maybe you're not providing necessary training, or maybe the system, the interface is all wonky and it doesn't help them. You really need to understand what the perceptions are out there, not just base it on the metrics, but actually get in and figure out do they really think it's providing the value you think it is. Because the other thing, from a modernization perspective, I always define services in two ways, right? You have the services that the users interact with every day, their laptop or their mobile device or their email. Those are things that they can find tangible value out of. It's harder for them to understand what the value they're getting from that server sitting on a rack somewhere, or that virtual server sitting up in Amazon or Azure or wherever it might be. They don't understand that. So the way you go about modernizing those services are a little bit different.
I guess in some cases, small numbers you mentioned, like say 1% downtime or 1 second of latency, might not seem like much, or 99% might sound pretty good. But in the reality of operating those systems day in, day out, 99% is, 10,000 hours out of a million that it's down, or 1% latency times 10,000 users. Next thing you know, you've got stoppages and long wait times and so on. So you really have to be fine-grained, I guess, in how you think about those numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing a lot of agencies and GDIT as well, we need to do a better job of baselining these applications and services when they go online. I don't know how many times a service has been running great for 2 years and all of a sudden people are complaining because of performance issues. And it's really hard for you to pinpoint sometimes where that degradation is coming from because you don't have anything to look back at, say, here's what it looked like when we first put it in. What changed, related to that service? So, yeah, looking at those numbers, it's not always evident by just looking at the numbers. How well you're performing.
And I guess the companion piece to that is it's probably useful to have a really good inventory of all the possible systems that might impinge on a service delivery so that you can find out where the issue lies first.
Yeah, and that's always been a kind of a legacy challenge in our customer environments, right? You have all these technical silos, and it's been, from a legacy perspective, it's been difficult to look across how all those parts, and we call them configuration items, fit together to provide those services and applications that the users are actually using. So, one of the first things we try to do in an environment is, one, inventory everything that's there, and then correlate all that underlying infrastructure up to what are the capabilities and services actually being provided to the users. And then from there, you can actually start to monitor and get an enterprise view across all of that to really understand, where something might be degraded, or where some anomalies might be coming from that could impact the performance.
And I'm imagining that type of exercise might show that, well, all you have to do is change this switch or this, whatever it is, this configuration here, and you'll be up to
Mhm.
speed. And that could give a clue to an agency, well, good, I don't have to spend a lot of money there. I can go on to the next problem, which might be more subtle and more comprehensive.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, some of these performance problems, especially the intermittent ones, are a little harder to work with. So, if you don't have that enterprise visibility, Tuesday afternoon, you have this problem, but it goes away, and then you're like, well, scratching your head. Well, where do I go from here, right? So if you have that enterprise visibility and you have baselines, you can look back and say, this is what happened at this time, which causes this issue.
All right. On that note, we'll take a short break. My guest today is Rob Smallwood. He's the Senior Director for Digital Modernization at GDIT. And I'm Tom Temin on Federal Insights, this part of the Digital Modernization series discussing automation, sponsored by GDIT here on Federal News Network.